Hi, we're here chatting today with Robb Hunt, who's the executive producer at the Village Theater in Issaquah, Washington. Robb, maybe we can start with you talking to us a little bit about your background and how you got into musical theater and theater in general, and what led you to the Village Theater in Issaquah.
Wow, that's a big topic.
Yeah.
It turns out I went to college for accounting and business management, and worked for a number of years at a consulting firm in that area, and had found a specialty in nonprofit consulting, and was working with a number of organizations like the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, and locally with even the Fifth Avenue Theater and the Science Center and the Seattle Repertory Theater. And meanwhile, I had always been a musical theater actor on the side. And so I was performing, and this fellow came from Montana and wanted to start a theater in Issaquah. And I'd been working around and about, and so we got together, and I said I'd help him start this theater, and so we started the theater together and filled out all the nonprofits and information, and got incorporated and did all of these things, and started doing shows together. And I was in a bunch of the early shows, and then after about 5 years, he left to pursue a film career, and left me with the place. And over time, it became a full-time job. I dropped all my consulting, and here I am today after 37 years.
Amazing. And I know you have two venues there at Village Theater, and I know how much it's grown over the years. You've always had a commitment to musicals in general, but you've developed a real commitment and contribution to the development of new musicals, in particular through your program that you call Village Originals. Can you talk to us about how that got started and how you've grown your audience so that you can do world premieres on your main stage?
Sure. We started doing new musicals very early in our history in the 80s, and found them to be something that our audience would like, but not for a steady diet. And so we started including every other year a new musical in what we do in our main stage season, and then we decided, well, we needed to build more of an infrastructure for that. And so we started doing things like readings and developmental productions and that kind of things. And eventually came up with a name for the program, which we call Village Originals. And now it's expanded into a number of areas that we do staged readings in our festival. We do developmental productions in our beta series now, and we do writers' residencies. We do some commissioning, and then now every year one of our main stage shows is a new musical. In fact, a couple of years we've done 2 new musicals in our main stage season, but that's been a little more unusual.
Yeah. Well, I think it's really amazing what you've done to sort of grow your audience into having a hunger for new musicals, and certainly your festival in the summer has really, I think, paved the way for that over the years, where you've brought your subscribers to see shows at the early stages, so that when they come to a world premiere on your main stage, they feel an investment. But that's taken a long time, hasn't it, Robb? How did you have the patience to go through that process, knowing that, and did you always know you'd get where you got to?
Yeah, it would have required a lot more patience, I think, if it had been our only part of our mission. But we love to do musicals of any sort here, and so just doing good work and building the quality of our productions and all of that has been something that we've been able to move forward. When some of the new musical work maybe a little bit, 2 steps forward, 1 step back kind of thing as we went forward, trying to develop a methodology, a way of working with the writers, with our audience to get it all to work together. But we've evolved to a pretty good place because the audience does participate in the developmental process. They sit in talkbacks and talk to the writers, and they'll also fill out questionnaires and make suggestions. And they're getting pretty savvy about their suggestions. They can talk about all the aspects of the musical and the arc and the music and the pacing and all kinds of things that they'll put some very insightful comments on the form. But particularly, it's important to know what's confusing in a new work that doesn't come across to the audience, because the writers and the director and everybody that's working on it day to day already knows what the words are and what they mean, but it doesn't necessarily come across to the audience, and that's part of the process of developmental work, is to figure that out and to work with the writers to solve those problems.
Absolutely. And you guys have done such an amazing job of creating that environment, and you've been able to actually launch some new musicals, not only to premiere in your own space, but to move on to some pretty significant spots. Can you talk to us a little bit about the musicals that you've launched at Village that have gone on to some great success?
Sure. Well, one was Next to Normal, which actually started, we did the first reading and the first workshop of that here in Issaquah. And it started as a show called Feeling Electric, and it had a number in there about feeling electric, which is no longer in the show. And another one where the psychiatrist needed to increase the medication, so it was called Up the Dose. And but a lot of that evolved into what is now Next to Normal and has gone on to Tony Awards and a Pulitzer Prize, which is pretty exciting. Another one was a show called $1 Million Quartet, which we started in our festival and workshopped it here in our smaller theater, and then developed it to the point where it went on our main stage. And in that case, the 3 of our 4 quartet members went on to Chicago and to New York, and one of them won the Tony Award for, I guess, featured actor in a musical. And that was Jerry Lee Lewis, Levi Christ won. And so that was a very exciting project too. And that one, that show ran in Las Vegas for several years. It ran in Chicago for, I think, 8 years or something. And it's now on Norwegian cruise lines.
Wow.
So you can go on a cruise on Norwegian and the Mediterranean and watch $1 Million Quartet.
Fantastic. So how do you go about, Rob, choosing the shows that you're going to nurture in that way? How do shows find their way into your festival and then onto your main stage? Is there a submission process? How does all of that happen?
Sure. We do accept submissions. We like to have a reference, either an agent submission or another theater company that we've worked with. But if it doesn't have that, then we won't necessarily look at the script and score. We have a pre-process where we'll sort of do a pre-evaluation. But if it comes from an agent or from with a reference from another theater, then we'll take a look. And we have a bunch of readers that we pay to read the shows and who are pretty versed now in reading and listening to the music and making comments. And they'll write an evaluation. And the shows get read by 2 readers, and then that information comes back. And if there's a recommendation or a consider involved in that, then it will often go to our artistic team, which is me, Steve Tompkins, our artistic director, and Brandon Ivey, our associate artistic director, and then our resident music director is part of that team, and also our production manager. And we all we'll read those shows that are recommended, and then we'll put together a festival, and we'll consider other shows for other developmental ways of working on it.
And is that the only way? You also, I know, go to the National Alliance for Musical Theater, the NAMM Conference every year, and the festival there. So that's another way, I imagine, that shows can come to your attention, and other festivals around the country.
Yes, and we've done a number of shows that the NAMM has done and at their festival, and those shows, typically the way we do it is we'll go see those shows, and then we'll ask the writers to submit that show to us. And they usually are happy to do that, unless they're already locked into some other developmental path.
Well, and I remember there was a number of years ago, there was a piece when I was on the selection committee. I think we were on the committee together for NAMMT, and there was a piece that didn't make it into the festival, but that we both were enamored of, the Fairy Stories by Paul Graham Brown,
Right.
who's a British
Yes.
writer who lives in Germany. And so we sort of formed a partnership where we did a workshop here at New Musicals Inc. and then sent it on to you guys, and you wound up doing a developmental production. That was a really a fun collaboration.
Yeah, that was a very fun show, and we had a good time doing that developmental production. I think it was Paul's birthday a few weeks ago. I remember seeing that fly by Facebook, sent him a happy birthday message.
That's great. Now, you were talking about the festival, about choosing to put shows into the festival. Can you talk to us a little bit about your annual summer festival, what it's made up of, and your Village Original folks who come to see it? And your particular bent on making it not just about shows, but also about parties.
Well, it's an overall experience, and we want people to be Village Originals members and have a good time doing that. And it's all a big package. And so we do it in one weekend, where we put 5 shows together and do stage readings of them. We do the full show, so not like NAMM where it's just a cutting. We do the full show, and then we'll have some additional activities in there. We have a songwriter showcase. We'll have an introductory party where we'll do a little preview of each of the shows, so the audience can get an idea of what each of the shows are, and then we'll do other parties along the way. There's one at my house, so that's for the members and the artists, and they all come over after the show. So that one runs pretty late. Which is
and it's an absolutely beautiful setting too. Whether it's raining or not, it's a beautiful setting at your place.
Right. Yeah. So that's a lot of fun, and then we'll have one for our upper level members. The memberships are multiple levels, and so there's an entry level for $75 you can be a member, but then it goes up to $1,000 and $1,500 to have more access to more things, and invited to some dinner parties where we'll have a special guest come and talk about the developmental process for new musicals, and they'll be able to ask questions and that kind of thing.
Yeah, so you make the festival a real event that people want to really take part in. When is it happening this year, Rob? Can you give us the dates?
Yes, I have to look them up again. It's the second full weekend in August. That's when it always is, and so it'll be the 11th, 12th, and 13th.
Great, that's wonderful. Rob, we've been asking folks we've been talking to a particular fantasy question that I want to throw your way. If you were to wake up tomorrow morning and discover you suddenly had $100 million that you could use to earmark towards the development of new musicals, how would you want to go about spending that money other than on parties?
That's a really good question. I mean, that certainly is something that we would want to do. We would love to have an endowment for new musicals where the proceeds from the endowment could be, the earnings from the endowment could be used on an annual basis to support that developmental process. And that's actually something we're working on now. $100 million is actually much more than our goal, but it would be joyous to have that much. But using that money in a planned way, we would like to expand our work to be able to do more developmental productions and more runs of smaller productions. Our main stage audience is a unique audience, as most organizations are. We would love to have longer runs of a little more edgy material that aren't destined to our main stage show. Main stage season that could run in our smaller place stage for a longer period of time. Of course, that in our case would require some place to put the kids' production, so we'd have to work that out, and maybe that's another theater. I don't know. Right now we have our 2 main stages in Issaquah and Everett, and then each city has a smaller theater. And in Issaquah, it's our first stage that's used for Village Originals and for Kids Stage. Up in Everett, it's a smaller theater with classrooms and so forth that's used just for our Kids Stage program. I'd like to move our Village Originals up there as well, so that that city has readings and workshops and developmental productions, so that they can get involved.
Right. Well, and both Issaquah and Everett are within pretty easy access of Seattle, so I imagine you get a lot of audience that makes the trek all the way from the big city.
We do. It's actually in North Seattle. It's easier to get to Everett than it is to get to downtown Seattle. So that's an advantage we have up there. So we do have a lot of people commuting north to come see our shows.
Fantastic. So Rob, to wrap up, I want to ask you a two-part question. You see a lot of new musicals and you get a lot of submissions. What do you think is the future of musical theater? Where is it headed? And what advice would you give to the writers of the musicals of tomorrow who want to be a part of that future?
It's a really good question. I see an increase in musical development and new musicals on stages. I see it more to large theater world, the non-standard that haven't been doing as many musicals, but they're finding that the musicals are what people want to see, at least part of the time. And so I'm seeing more musicals being done there. I'd like to see, and I think we will see, more of the musicals that are developed at Village Theater and other theaters across the country go into those Lord theaters and have a life that doesn't necessarily require a life on Broadway. And I think that that's happening a bit more, and I think that will continue to happen.
Great. And what advice would you give to writers, especially ones that are submitting to you?
I guess understand our who we are and how we fit in, and get to know us the best you can, and send the material, and if you're submitting a play or a musical, get a theater that you know to recommend you to us, or an agent to recommend it, and then we'll be sure to look hard at it and give it a fair shake. I think sending to all of the festivals and to get to know as many theaters as possible is useful. I would participate in NAMM in any way you can, and hang out at some of those events and introduce yourselves to folks.
Well, and in terms of the musicals themselves, would you have anything to recommend about themes, about what people are trying to say? What direction would you steer people in, and what they're actually choosing to write?
It's a really good question. I think it's a lot to do with what the writers really want to say, and I think more and more we are going as an industry to saying some important things. We're certainly in a time now in our country and in the world that needs some serious looks at some things, and one of the reasons I think musicals are so important is that they can change minds through emotions without the people knowing that it's happening to them, the audience. And I think that we've seen that happen with shows from almost the very beginning, with West Side Story and South Pacific and King and I. A number of shows have come up that made people think and maybe have changed attitudes along the way about certain topics. And I think we as a society need to do that, and musicals can help.
Absolutely. The power of the musical. We should not underestimate it. Thank you very much, Rob.
Absolutely right.
Thank you so much for everything you guys at the Village Theater do for musicals, and we will be watching to see what comes out of your theater next. And we really appreciate you chatting with us today. Thanks so much.
Great.
Take care.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Good
you.
to see you.
You too. Okay, bye-bye.